The main thing we're going to talk about is sin. The idea that sin is a separation from God, which to John Milton was the most painful thing he could imagine. This is a story about the Garden of Eden, how Adam and Eve ate from the forbidden tree of knowledge and were kicked out. It'll take a while, but we'll get there. Milton starts by invoking the Holy Spirit as his muse. He says, "Muse, you're better than all the Greek muses. You've been there since the beginning. You know the whole story. So inspire me like you inspired Moses to write the Ten Commandments. And that way I can bring people closer together with God." Why did Eve and Adam eat the forbidden fruit? Why would they flout the one restriction placed on them in the Garden of Eden? There are many reasons, but one is that they were tempted into it by Satan, who wanted revenge on God. Satan had been an angel, one of thousands of angels, but he didn't want to serve in heaven. So along with some other angels, he formed a rebellion. The war was horrible and bloody and violent, and we'll get into it eventually, but at the end they lost. And God cast these angels out in a fiery explosion out of heaven, where they fell for 9 days and nights through the chaos of the universe until they crash-landed in hell. But angels are immortal, and even fallen angels can't be killed. So as we begin our story, Satan is lying there in hell in pain and anger and hatred and envy. And he opens his eyes and he looks around. Satan can hardly see. He's chained to the ground so he can only lift his head. The only light comes from sulfur that burns without ever seeming to burn up, and the air is choked with smoke and ash. But through it, Satan sees that hell is a giant furnace, miles wide. This is the prison that God has created for the rebellious angels, far from heaven. Here, everything has been taken away from them, even hope. All that remains is torture. Satan also sees all around him his compatriots are also chained up. The closest one is Beelzebub, his old lieutenant, so he calls out to him, "Beelzebub, is that you? You look horrible. I mean, you used to be glorious, and now you look horrible. You and I used to be joined together in our cause, joined together in word and deed, and now it seems we're only joined together in our misery. We never knew that we could be defeated. We never knew that the thunder of God's wrath could force us from the field of battle. But so what? We swore that we would not bow down before God, and I, for one, never will. Though we may be defeated, we will rise and rise again, and with steadfast conviction and courage in our hearts, we will fight eternally, and we will have our revenge." Beelzebub replies, "Too true, Chief, too true. I don't know if it was fate or chance or if we were just not up to the task, but we lost. And who cares if we still live? If this hell is to be our jail, then God can do with us what he likes. When will it end? This sucks." Satan replies, "Now is not the time to lose heart, Beelzebub. We can still win this thing. We can devote ourselves to fighting and corrupting the work that God does and turn good into evil. Look on the dim side. We're no longer being pursued, are we? We have an opportunity to rest and regroup. So here's what we're going to do. I need you to gather all the angels over in that field, and we will confer and decide what to do next." As he speaks, Satan is lying in a pool of flame, his arms and legs chained down so that only his outstretched head reaches above the flames. And he's huge. I mean, imagine a sailor lost at sea who sees a whale surfacing at night and he hopes for a moment that it might be an island. That's how big Satan is. Now, to understand everything that happens next, you have to realize that it is all according to God's will. God allows it to happen so that Satan might compound his own damnation, and so that Satan might see how others might be saved despite his own best efforts. Satan lunges upward, struggling and then snapping the chains that have held him down. He unfolds his great wings and takes flight, soaring above the lake of fire, until he finds a dry spot to touch down. The ground is solid, but it is desolate. It looks like a volcano after an eruption, with ash and rubble strewn everywhere. Beelzebub is just a few moments behind. He lands as well, and they both rejoice at their escape. Satan gazes out at hell and says to Beelzebub, "It's no heaven, but it'll do. We wanted to be as far away from God as possible, and here we are. It's not like he's going to kick us out of here and chase us someplace worse. And attitude is everything. Keep a positive mindset, and it doesn't matter where you are. You can be heaven, hell, anywhere. And heaven's always going to be God's dominion. I'd rather be here in hell, where I can control my own destiny. So let's go get the others from that burning lake, and then we can come back here and decide what to do next." Beelzebub replies, "Right now our friends lie in the lake of fire, sad and full of fear as we were. But I'm sure if they heard the voice of their chief, they would take heart." So Satan walks to the edge of the burning lake. On his back is slung a great shield, as big and round as the moon as seen through a telescope. He carries a spear that is as large as the mast of a ship. He uses the spear as a walking stick to traverse the rocky, burning ground. Arriving on the shoreline, Satan sees all the other angels lying in the lake of fire. There are so many of them that they look like autumn leaves in a brook, or like seaweed in the Red Sea, where the Israelites once escaped from the Egyptians, and where they later saw their pursuers drowned. Satan calls out to these angels, "Warriors, princes! What, is this how you decide to rest after you lost the battle for heaven? Is this how you show your surrender to God, who, by the way, may be on his way down here now, to take advantage of your laziness and drive you down to the bottom of the lake? So get up now, or be lost and gone forever." Hearing these words of their commander, the angels are ashamed of themselves. They hop to attention like watchmen caught sleeping at the post. They beat their wings and take flight, filling the cavern until they look and sound like a swarm of locusts in the air. Then, as Satan points his spear to direct them, they descend all at once onto the plain, like an invading barbarian horde. The angels arrange themselves in military columns, with the officers at the front. These are leaders who once commanded respect and reverence, but since their rebellion, their names have been blotted out from heaven's records. Now they have no names at all. Eventually they'll be given new ones by humankind, and those are the names we'll use here. Who are these demons who came so readily when Satan called? A few of these fallen angels will later escape hell and come to be worshipped on earth as false gods. First among these is the bloodthirsty demon we now know as Moloch, whose followers would honor him by committing ritual child sacrifice, with the cries of the young ones drowned out by drums and loud music. They say there was once a temple built to honor Moloch in a beautiful grove, but the place is known today as the Valley of the Damned. The next of Satan's officers is one who will come to be known as Chemos. They will be worshipped the world over, even in the shadow of the Temple of Solomon, with wild ceremonial orgies. Chemos may appear one moment as male, and the next as female. For angels, even fallen angels, are not made from flesh and brittle bones. They are heavenly spirits, and they may choose to take the forms of men or women, or both or neither at the same time. Next among Satan's officers come two together, a husband and wife. There is Astaroth, the crescent-horned queen of heaven, and her husband Tammuz, who the Mesopotamians say is killed and then reborn every year, causing the river Adonis to run red as if with blood every spring. Behind them stands Dagon, the Philistine sea god, with the head and arms of a man and the body and tail of a fish, so it's unclear how he manages to stand with the others. They say that the Ark of the Covenant was once captured by the Philistines and kept in a temple locked overnight with an idol of Dagon. But when morning came, the Ark was untouched and the idol had been hacked to pieces. Next in line is Rimmon, who has power over the wind and rain. The legends say that Rimmon once found a fair weather fan in the Hebrew king Ahaz, who abandoned his own god to worship Rimmon instead. Behind him there is the Egyptian trio, Isis, Osiris, and Horus, who can transform themselves into animals. On Earth, they will use this to sow confusion, so that people wonder if any beast they pass might in fact be a god in disguise. Finally, there is Belial, the worthless one, lord of every vice. On Earth, there are no temples to Belial, but they say that every young man who stumbles drunkenly out of a bar early in the morning is an acolyte of his. These are the chief officers in Satan's army, but he has thousands in his ranks, including all of the Greek gods of Olympus who were once worshipped as far away as Great Britain. All of these demons and more stand in formation. Their eyes are downcast. Satan sees this, and for a moment he's afraid. But then he commands his standard-bearer to raise his banner high, and he commands the trumpeters to blare their trumpets. And seeing the flags and hearing the trumpets, the demons take heart, and they give out a mighty cheer that echoes throughout the caverns of hell and even out into the chaos. And they pound their spears into the ground, and they raise their shields above their head, and Satan knows they are his. Now unified in their purpose, the demons begin to march. They breathe as if with one set of lungs. They step as if with one pair of feet, ignoring the pain from the burning ground. Satan watches them parade before him, and he is pleased. He sees that they have as much ferocity as the Achaeans who invaded Troy, as much courage as the knights of King Arthur, and as much skill as any medieval tournament champions. Satan himself stands tallest of all, but he is the worst for wear. He looks like a castle turret that is beginning to crumble, and his face is covered in battle scars. As he looks out at the other fallen angels, who look like oak trees after a forest fire, he is filled with a mixture of pride and regret, for he knows that it is for his sake that they gave up heaven. Satan calls out to the angels, but his words turn into a sob. 3 times he tries to speak, but he can only weep. Finally, the crowd circles close around him, and he addresses them. Spirits, never think that our exile here in hell diminishes your glory. We are mighty. Nobody could have predicted that our rebellion would end in defeat. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe my poor leadership or lack of courage caused us to fail. And if anyone here thinks so, let him speak now. No. There is one reason for our loss. The so-called King of Heaven tempted us into battle by concealing his strength and letting us believe that we would have an easy victory. Satan continues, now we may have a better chance of victory through covert action and guerrilla warfare. We know that God was planning to create a new world. Perhaps that's where we should start. But in any case, the path forward is only through war. There is no chance for peace. As he concludes, the angels all draw flaming swords, which light up the caverns of hell, and they beat them against their shields. Everyone gets to work transforming their new home. They divide into teams, one of which is led by Mammon, a demon with a perpetually bent neck. Mammon got that way because even before the rebellion, rather than admire the wonderful landscape of heaven, he was always looking downward at the gold-paved streets. Now in Hell, he directs his team to mine a nearby volcano for both gold and iron ore to use in construction of a new city. Yes, even in Hell there are riches and there are tall buildings. Which leads you to wonder, when you see such things on Earth, how much value do they have? A second group melts down the ore using heat from the lake of fire, and they separate out the various metals. A third group creates molds in the shape of building materials, and they channel the molten metal into these molds in the same way that you might channel air into the multiple pipes of an organ. This is how the demons create the great temple of Hell, grander than any temple on Earth. It has a roof of pure gold, supported by sturdy Doric columns. Flanking the entrance are grotesque statues. Inside there is a great open area, with a floor of polished, smooth stone, lit brilliantly by many lamps. At Satan's command, the trumpeters once again blare their trumpets, and heralds call everyone from the far corners of Hell to a meeting at the great temple of Pandemonium, a word which means the gathering place of all demons. As they start to file in, the demons praise the handiwork of the temple's architect, Mulciber, who had once designed the great palaces of heaven before being kicked out with the rest of the rebellious angels. His story has been corrupted and is known to the Greeks as the story of Hephaestus, the master craftsman god who was thrown off Olympus by Hera. The demons continue to file in, filling the temple floor. When there's no more room on the floor, some take flight, perching on columns or circling overhead, filling the air. When there's no more room in the air, the crowd resembles a swarm of bees, and at a signal, all of the demons at once transmogrify themselves, shrinking themselves magically down to the size of woodland fairies until there is room for all to sit. Finally, after a silence, the great council of Hell begins.